Here at the Post, we decided to see if we could try something new leading into the trade deadline. If I could kind of do a daily, what I'm hearing, what I'm thinking. I hope my aggregator friends continue to understand the difference between hearing and thinking. But number one, I'll say that I am hearing from multiple places that teams are asking the Yankees about Ben Rice as a catcher, and that they're interested to find out, can Ben Rice catch, if they could come to peace with that. And what would that mean? Well, the Yankees obviously aren't trading Ben Rice unless it's in something significant. They think he's a middle of the order hitter, and he certainly has hinted at that this year. And he would be the obvious internal candidate to replace Paul Goldschmidt, who's a free agent at the end of this year for 2026. So it would have to be in something significant, but it would allow them to stay away from using too many prospects if they were able to make a bigger deal by including Rice, who's obviously in the major leagues and performing this season. You know, keep in mind, Rice was drafted as a catcher, played largely as a catcher in the minor leagues, but only has played 5 games as a catcher this season. He started twice. He certainly doesn't lack for confidence. He believes that he's a catcher. And one thing I would keep in mind is, just like the Yankees have a lot of credibility in the catching market, because just since the end of 2023, they've traded, here's a list: Kyle Higashioka, Alex Jackson, Carlos Narvaez, Augustin Ramirez, Ben Rothford, Luis Torrens, and Jose Trevino. And of course, they're in the midst of, or have developed, J.C. Esquera, Austin Wells, and Rice as catchers. And let's not forget that the Yankees used major league players last year when they didn't have depth in their farm system in the last offseason. Jose Trevino goes for Fernando Cruz. They use Cody Petit for Cody Bellinger. And of course, they use Nestor Cortez for Devin Williams. And that allowed them to do a bigger trade. So it's something to keep in mind. You know, the one thing also is it would clear up a little of the depth issues right now. You know, every day that someplace in that Grisham, Bellinger, Dominguez, Stanton, Rice, Goldschmidt group, there's 2 guys who sit because you can't play everybody. So if Rice was removed, it might be easier. But again, remember, Goldschmidt and Bellinger are free agents at the end of the year, and Stanton is constantly an injured player. So there's real danger in trading Rice, especially if he's going to be a middle of the order hitter long term. One last thing to remember. I was told that at the Yankee Blue Jay series, which is a series between 2 contenders, there were scouts for the Padres, Phillies, Rangers, and Mariners, among others. Those are all contending teams, which would suggest to me that contenders are looking at other contenders because the market is having problems doing the traditional buyer-seller thing. So could 2 contenders find matches for each other, or can they be part of even a 3-team trade, which is obviously very difficult? And I wonder if that some of that is where a guy like Rice might get into play, is between 2 contenders. Issue number 2, always listen to what people say, but look at what they do. At this moment, the Diamondbacks haven't screamed out loud that they're sellers. But I will say this: among their most trusted set of eyes is their special assignment scout, Todd Green, who's a former major league catcher, and he's been on the Yankees AAA team at Scranton Wilkes-Barre. And I would think that that's a strong signal. The Diamondbacks, as we speak, are 50-53. They're 5.5 games out of a wild card spot. They've had devastating injuries to their pitching staff this year. The biggest to Corbin Burns, who's their ace. They're facing a situation where Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly are going to be free agents at the end of the year. They need to restock pitching. And in Merrill Kelly, Zach Gallen, Josh Naylor, and Eugenio Suarez, they have 4 walk-year players of great interest in this marketplace, and they certainly could go out and get some major league capacity pitching prospects, you know, and that's an area of strength for the Yankees. And they've been tied to all of those players except for Naylor. They've been particularly, you know, tied to Suarez because they need a third baseman so bad. I will also note that, you know, people like the Yankees pitching, like they've gotten calls from, say, Pittsburgh about Carlos Lagrange. You know, Pittsburgh is a team with David Bednar and Dennis Santana relievers available, and Mitch Keller a starter. who's probably likely to go in this marketplace. And Arizona also, just to go back to the catching thing, very interested in maybe, because Gabriel Moreno, who's a player they like, has been off injured. If they could get another catcher, and the Yankees have to complete a trade, they have a backup type like J.C. Esquera. Ramon Flores is at AAA where Todd Green is. And of course, the Rice issue, if that becomes a larger trade in some way. And, Todd Green will certainly know catching. He was a major league catcher for 11 seasons. One of those, 2001 with the Yankees. People might remember famously before Game 3 of the World Series that year, Green caught the first pitch after 9/11 from President George Bush. Who played in that World Series? Diamondbacks and Yankees. I wonder if they'll get together again here in the short term. And look, one scout told me in the last few days, he said, my schedule is literally changing day by day. That's how volatile everything is right now. Between teams like Arizona are buying or selling, Minnesota buying or selling, St. Louis buying or selling. There's a bunch of teams in this middle ground. He said, my itinerary changes day to day. And just to show how volatile this is, we're doing this on a Thursday. On Wednesday afternoon, a Wednesday matinee game, the Marlins and the Padres played. And Sandy Alcantara, who's not been good this year, but pitched kind of the best game of his season. 7 innings, 1 unearned run. He didn't walk anyone. He struck out 4. By the way, that made his ERA 6.66. That's a very devilish number, as you know. The second worst ERA among qualifiers is actually by Zach Gallen, who's another guy who might go in this marketplace. And what's amazing is because of Alcantara's pedigree, he's coming back from missing all of last season with after Tommy John surgery, so he didn't pitch in 2024. There's still teams that think he's going to get traded in this marketplace. That will be fascinating to see with a guy who's struggling. He's owed $17 million next year, $21 million the year after. He's probably got about $6.4 million left this year. And the guy who started for the Padres was Dylan Cease. And Cease also is not having a good year. He lost this game. He's 3-10 with a 4.59 ERA. That's significantly up from where he was last year. But he's still a guy who's striking out almost 30% to hitters. His walk rate is pretty good in the 8% range. He's a bit of a horse. And the Padres clearly are out in the marketplace trying to see, can they use him to go get a left fielder and starting pitching depth? They would obviously like the idea of like Cease, Pivetta, Darvish, and eventually Michael King, who's due back in August from a shoulder injury, as a rotation for the playoffs. But maybe to get to just the playoffs and to be set up for next year, because Cease and King are free agents, they need to add some starting pitching depth. I would remember that the Mets and especially the Yankees were very interested in Cease last spring training. So spring training of 2024, when he got traded from the White Sox to the Padres. But one of the reasons the Padres were able to get him was they had Drew Thorpe, who they had gotten from the Yankees in the Juan Soto trade, and they were able to pull down Cease. And I think Cease is a guy who very possibly in the next few days could be traded once again.